Howdy world, how are we today? Coffee with Sam podcast episode 22. I'm not yet sponsored by any coffee people just yet, so I'm still drinking bog standard instant coffee. But if anyone knows any coffee provider or coffee brewer that wants to hook me up, then yeah, get over and I will give you a shout out on the podcast. But today's podcast is sponsored by I Dare You Clothing. I dare the word you, the not the word, the letter U. Geez, can't even get my own business name right. The letter U clothing.com. I dare you clothing.com. And my brand is to dare people to do things like this, to get out there and to have that dare to attitude about work, business, or life. And I do nice clothing, man. Oof, it's good quality. We do t-shirts, we do snapbacks, and we've originally released the new masks. So let's get into episode number 22. And my guest is Doctor, yes guys, we got a doctor on the podcast, Doctor Steph Hill. Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Stephanie Hill.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on and to get into your very intense 2020. When people say they've had a bad 2020, there's obviously a lot more doctors and nurses out there that have had the same, but yours has been pretty damn, for a doctor, probably happy. You're probably excited for it to be up here. But for a lot of people, downhill. And I want to get straight into the nitty gritty about being on the intensive care unit during COVID, because I'm very excited to let people know what it's actually like. I know you've been very
Yeah.
vocal about this. So yeah, that first day, knowing you're going onto a COVID ward, what are you feeling?
Well, first to start with, when COVID first started, I was actually on anaesthetics. I was in theatres, and basically for the 2 weeks prior to it really hitting us, theatres just shut down. They cancelled all of the elective surgery, only had emergency surgery. So there were so many of us who were doing anaesthetics with nothing to do effectively apart from get trained up ready for when COVID hit. And it was bizarre, such a strange atmosphere. Everybody was scared, everybody was nervous, nobody knew what to expect. We were having all these training sessions into how to put all of the PPE on, how to take it off, how to intubate somebody who has COVID, because the protocol was completely different to what we were used to. So we were running all these drills and practicing, but we knew in the back of our minds that at some point we were going to have to be doing that soon. And the first time I had to do it was on a Sunday night shift, and I was on with, it's just me and a registrar on overnight covering the intensive care unit. And when you do that, you cover the whole of the hospital, all of the sick patients. You go to the trauma calls, the cardiac arrest calls. So if there were to be COVID patients coming in, we were going to have to go and see them. And that was the first night that we had a COVID patient admitted to the intensive care unit. And so nobody else had been through the call to them, having to intubate them and bring them to the unit. So we were the guinea pigs, I guess, in that sense. And that was really scary. We got a call down to A&E resus, and they said, we think it's a COVID patient. This patient was really, really sick. Their oxygen levels were about 70%, and that was on the highest level of oxygen you can be given without being intubated. So if people don't know, intubated is when we put the tube down into the mouth, down into the lungs, which allows us to connect them to the ventilator to breathe for them. So we're stood outside this room in resus, and we had to, for the first time ever, put the PPE on for real. And everything just went out of the window. I forgot everything, and everyone was in the same boat. The A&E consultants weren't coming into the room with us because it was you could only go in. It was just myself, the registrar, and one of the outreach nurses that could go in, because obviously they want as minimal people as possible in there while we're intubating, because it's what's called an aerosol generating procedure, which means that those droplets that are spread when people cough, they're spread sort of a lot more when you put in a direct route down into the airways. So you don't want people exposed, even if you're wearing PPE. So we put it on. The mask that I'd been trained how to put on, they didn't have any of those ones, so I had to use a different one. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this mask even going to fit me? Is it even going to do its job? But I didn't have a choice. Well, I guess I did. I could have said no, but I wasn't going to. So we put our stuff on.
I bet that's hard when that's your job, to have fear like that. But it is a case of you can say no, but you, in the back of your mind, saying again, it's what you signed up for, but it's not what you signed up for. But you want to do your job. You want to help that patient, whatever's wrong with them. And I think that must be really hard for you to put yourself at that much risk to do a job just because you want to do that job.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a theme that we saw a lot throughout COVID, is where I worked on the intensive care unit, we were really lucky with PPE. We had a good supply of it because we were put first, really. But there were other wards that didn't have enough, and nurses and doctors are having to make that decision every day, whether they carried on doing their job at risk or they said no. So yeah, it was difficult.
So you're in this room. You're now wearing PPE. You don't know if it works. You don't even know if you put it on
Yeah.
correctly because you're probably in about 2 days training. Which, if look how long you've already done your medical training, people who have military training, it's definitely not 2 weeks. So you're in this room. Do all those worries go out the window because you are literally so focused on your job, or are they always still there anyway?
No, they stayed. They stayed there, and we'd practiced. I've been part of intubations before, and the basics are the same. So luckily, that bit was sort of on autopilot for us. The registrar that I was with was a really junior reg. It's his first year as a registrar, so that was a big thing for him to be the person having to actually intubate that patient, because the president was the most senior person there, does it, because ideally you want to do it first time. So the pressure on him was just massive, and he just did an incredible job. He kept calm, which made me feel calm and outreach nurse feel calm, and we did it. And he passed the tube straight away, and luckily it went very smoothly. There were bits of the of what happened and the transfer up to intensive care that needed work, and we ended up seeing another patient later in that night who was on a ward, who also needed intubating and taking to the unit. And nothing really had been set in stone at that point, because we knew, as with most things during COVID, it was going to be trial and error. We were going to do things that were going to work or they weren't, and we'd have to learn from that. And so we took a lot away from that night shift with those two patients. They were our first two, and we learned a lot. We stayed after the night shift and chatted to the consultants about it and said what went well, what didn't go well, and a few things changed after that. So it was scary. I guess I always, it's weird, but I always feel privileged to be part of things like that, to be part of the team that looked after the first two. I guess was a
Well,
big learning curve for me.
yeah, like especially medically, you're always going to be excited to learn. So yes, you don't want to be learning in a pandemic. It's like a soldier doesn't really want to be learning in the war, but to be excited of something so big, and like you say, that there might be some calls that you and your team made that actually got sent around the country or around the world to different hospitals or different processes that were going in, that could be something you said or something you guys have done. Um, how many patients did you have, like your maximum on your
I,
ward?
so I think our average was about 11 COVID patients. So luckily, where I am, we weren't overwhelmed with it. We had things set up that, if need be, we could have had. So normally we have 2 intensive care units open at the hospital, and a normal intensive care has patients that come through the front door really sick. either with medical problems or if they've had a road traffic accident or they've fallen or anything like that, a trauma that needs to come in. And then we also have post-op patients who have had big elective surgeries, things like vascular surgeries, and they have to come to us for some monitoring after. Or patients who have had emergency surgeries often come to us. So that's what the ICU is normally for. And where I work, it's a big major trauma centre. It's also a neurosurgery centre. So it's a busy intensive care as it is. So some of those patients were not going to come through because all of the elective surgeries were cancelled, but we still got the traumas, we still got the brain injuries, things like that. Traumas reduced because less people were going out, less people were driving, less people were doing activities that means that you can get seriously hurt. So luckily our number of normal patients reduced, and so we had 3 intensive cares open instead of 2, and we had 2 of them for COVID patients, and we normally had 7 or 8 patients on each of those. So yeah, more than 11 actually, isn't that 14 or 15? And then we had
I don't think you were
probably about
counting.
no, and then we had about the same on our normal ICU that had moved downstairs to a different ward. So we had the capacity to have more patients, and they planned that if need be, we would have had COVID patients in theatres where the anaesthetic machines are. So we had space, but luckily we didn't need it.
So for the viewers and listeners, what does your normal job entail? So you're a doctor of medicine. So let's try and make how different this was for you. What would your normal job be on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so I'll just talk about when I worked in ICU. So last year, the training pathway that I'm on means that I do different rotations in different areas. But last year was supposed to be 6 months on the intensive care unit and 6 months in theatres and anaesthetics, putting people to sleep for their operations. So a normal day when I was in ICU, we would go in and we would do pre-ward round work. So there's up to 10 patients per unit, and maybe 2, 3, 4 junior doctors on there. It's a really well-staffed unit because the patients are sick. So we split up, divide and conquer, and we see either 2, 3, or 4 patients each before the ward round, and we do a full assessment, top to toe, of all their systems, examine them thoroughly. We familiarise ourselves with their story, why they're in hospital, the treatment they're on, and look at their blood tests, and then we make a plan as to what we think needs to happen with that patient throughout the day, whether we need to add in some antibiotics or reduce the antibiotics, or they need some electrolyte correction, they need some surgery, things like that. And then the consultant comes round and they do the ward round. They look at our assessment of the patient, they look at our plan, and they make their own plan. They may add things to our plan, change it, or they might just go with it. So that's for all of the patients, and then the rest of the day is spent executing those plans. So if we have to talk to other specialties, the surgeons, or endocrine for hormone things, then we would talk to them. If we need to organise scans or tests, then we can do that. So that's what a normal day would entail. In intensive care, everything's just that little bit more difficult. So they're sicker patients. So even things like cannulation is a bit more challenging because their veins might be shut down, or they might have had lots of cannulas before. Taking an ICU patient down to a CT scan is a big feat in itself, because normally a patient would just be taken down by themselves, but if they're intubated, a trained doctor has to go with them. Not just a qualified doctor, has to be a doctor that's trained in transferring a patient. So there's all that going on, but it was a nice job to do. I really, really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot. So do you want me to say then what it was like in COVID?
Where I was about to go, that is just so people could paint a picture, viewing and listening, like it's all like that, how different your job was. You've gone from, yes, someone's life's in your hands, but now your own life is in your hands. And I think
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people struggled with, not with just nurses and doctors, but this whole situation, is how easily this invisible killer problem can affect different things. And the fact that, like I say, you've gone from a very high level, intense job that you need to get right to now you've got to get it right because you could affect yourself. Or you've
Yeah,
even got to the point now where you've got to get dressed correctly.
yeah,
Otherwise, you and other people could be at risk. So, yeah, I just want to try and paint the picture of how different within 2 weeks your very intense job went to even more intense.
yeah,
Um, let's talk about the PPE. So I've seen pictures on your Instagram, and I'll probably put a picture somewhere on here because that'll be pretty cool. Um, of obviously the marks on your face from the real tight mask, and then how many layers? I saw your videos. Right, you've got a video right too that you put up of you
yeah.
putting it on. Um, that in itself must have been a challenge putting the PPE on. How many layers were there, and what did it entail?
Yeah, so I guess all that I just talked about with a normal day, simple things like, so the units are open. It's a locked unit, but in order to just walk on it, you can. And we wear scrubs just because it's a bit of a messy job and you don't want to get your clothes covered in stuff. But we could just walk onto the unit and we could go from patient, then to the bed from patient to patient, no problem. And that was immediate. So if the nurses needed us there and then, if a patient was really sick, we could be there like that. Whereas if in COVID, the units were enclosed, so they built walls around the unit with locked doors, and it was like there's one door and then another door, and then
See,
in between the first,
that in itself makes me scared. Like, gives me fear. Like, I'm locked into somewhere. Like, I just,
yeah,
it's like a movie. It's like it's that thought of air sealed type things is just. What?
yeah,
Sorry, carry on.
yeah, no, it's petrifying. And so to put the PPE on, I think took about 3 minutes to start with. So you have your scrubs on, you put one pair of gloves on, and then you put your boiler suit on. And those boiler suits ranged from really, so just throughout the pandemic, we had different suppliers. We had normal surgical gowns for some of it. We had Burberry boiler suits at some point, which were just terrible. Last time
Everyone
they
was
tried, but
everyone jumping on
they
the bandwagon.
yeah, they were so thick, and as you can imagine, wearing all that stuff was just so warm. And for us doctors, it wasn't as bad because I think the longest I was ever in the full PPE was about 5 hours, but usually it was sort of 2 to 3. Um, Whereas the nurses, they have their 12-hour shift and they had to change up their break system, but they were in it 4 hours, maybe longer at a time, out for half an hour, then back in it again for 4 hours. So they had it so much worse than anybody else. But those gowns, if they weren't the right ones, it could really just make or break your day. So you put the gown on, and then you have to put another pair of gloves on top. And we learned little things like cutting holes in the sleeves to put your thumb through and putting some tape round. Don't put the tape round that way because when you try and pull them off, then you can't. It has to be this way and this way. And then you put a hood on to cover your hair. And then you put your mask on, which has to be fitted really tight.
You had
And
like
then
a,
you
it was
put
like
your
a spray
visor on.
painting mask. It wasn't just like a normal mask like people are not wearing out in the streets because it's too tight.
Yeah.
It was like a spray painting mask, wasn't it? Uh,
Yeah, so they're FFPs. So it's a respirator, so it protects me from the environment. So it has to be really tight, fit on your face. There's a filter on the front. Yeah, they're not very nice. Sore on your nose, sore on your chin. I got jaw ache because you were like talking against it the whole time because it was holding your mouth shut effectively. So every time you talked, you're pushing against it. Um, it was tight around your head, so it get neck ache. You couldn't really look down with it on. It was quite difficult because it just held everything it still. But it was weird. Sometimes I could go in there and it would be so irritating after 10 minutes, and that would
you
be it.
think,
Then I knew I was going to have
yeah,
a horrible time.
for 5 hours, that's it.
Yeah, but then other times it just wouldn't bother me, and there was no correlation. If I was really busy and involved in something, then I tended not to notice. But sometimes even that didn't matter, and it was just doing my head in. But yeah, so if you imagine there's a sick patient, the nurse wants you there now. On a normal day, that's easy. You could run onto the unit if you wanted to, and you're there. Pop some gloves on, done. Whereas during COVID, if they needed you there, you had that 2 to 3 minutes. Even when we were at our quickest, it probably took us 2 minutes to put the PPE on. Then we had to get through those doors and in there. And they sort of said, they made it very clear that we need to take our time to put the PPE on. It's not like our lives come first. And they needed to tell us that, really, because otherwise I
You
know
forget
we'd want to be in there.
because like,
And
it's
it's
your
the
job.
same.
You're just
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
do your job.
exactly. And we're used to sort of just putting ourselves to the back of our minds, because really we're not at a risk normally. So, and just going in and doing what we need to do. And the same applied for any arrests on the ward. So normally, if there's a cardiac arrest on the ward, then obviously we'd run there and go in straight away. But you weren't allowed to go into a room if there was a cardiac arrest until you had full PPE on. And so that's a big time delay to get people in there.
Yeah.
So we went as quickly as we could, but that was also difficult as well, because you knew. And then if there was low staff levels, even just normal staff levels, if you are on one of the units, because there were 3 ICUs, if you're on one of the units with a sick patient with your PPE on, and then you have to be called to another one, you've then got the time to take your PPE off, which is actually more important than putting it on, because you're technically covered in the viral particles. So you have to take it off in a very specific way, take it off, and then go to the other unit, put some more on, and then go in. And our
Oh,
masks
so you
are
can't stay in the same.
no, because you can't leave the unit in the PPE, because
Oh, so you mean
it's
sorry,
in
from a COVID ward to another ward?
yeah, but even one COVID ward to another COVID ward,
Oh,
the
you can't
2
just keep it
ICUs,
on.
because the area between the 2
Wasn't
ICUs
locked
is
down.
clean. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Oh,
So you can't leave the unit in your PPE. You have to doff. Is the word. You have to take it off properly. Wash your shoes, wash your hands, wash your mask. Come out, and then you're supposed to leave your mask for 15 minutes while it's cleaned before you can put it on again. So it's pretty much impossible to go from one unit to the other very quickly. Luckily, I never had to be in that situation, but just
would you
theoretically.
would you feel like, just the thought of it now, did it not keep you awake at night, but going home, did you feel bad for leaving the hospital because you think, well, I can't see it, so it could be on me. I
Yeah,
could.
I did. Yeah, I did. And I would never go to a shop on my way home. I still won't do that now. Um, I wouldn't. The gym's closed, but I wouldn't have gone to the gym straight from work. Absolutely not. I'd come home, have a shower, wash my hair, and then that's that. I only live with my partner, who is a young, healthy man. So my guilt was a lot less than others who went home to elderly parents, went
Yeah.
home to their kids. So yeah, it was really difficult for
just
some
just that
people.
just that feeling of, obviously we're all a bit, it's a bit weirded out by it's we can't see it, but the fact that you've been in a room where it is, yes, you've taken it off correctly, but because it's not like you're covered in mud and you take your clothes off and you're like, oh, now I've got no mud on my skin. You can't see
Yeah,
it. So that, I bet that feeling, that thought of just, it could be on me
yeah,
is
yeah,
horrendous. And I know, obviously, for you that's horrendous. I know nurses had to start traveling home and doctors in their own clothes because they were getting threatened because they were spreading the virus.
yeah,
So I feel the public just don't understand. That's why I'm so glad that we've got to do this, because just sitting back and just talking about it, people might be like, okay, actually, yeah, I've been in a room with it. Now, they weren't trying to spread it, like they're not on purpose,
yeah,
but just that thought of saying that to someone puts even more pressure on you, pressure on
yeah,
nurses, more pressure than they need, just because the public just like to say whatever they want to say these days, just
yeah,
just to have a say. Um, so going onto that, you actually had COVID, correct?
Yeah.
Do you know how you can? Well, did you just basically say I contracted it at work, or?
So I hadn't been anywhere else to have got it. It must have been from work. And I was, so we had the clean intensive care unit as well, the one without the COVID patients. And I was actually working on there before I got sick. Um, there was a patient on there that I thought was unwell, and I thought he may have COVID, actually, may have contracted it. So and I'd looked after that patient for, I think, 3 days prior to me going off sick. But the nurse looking after that patient went off the day before me, and then I went off, and then one of my consultants that I work closely with went off with it the day after. So it's impossible to tell, but I think you can make educated guesses as to where you got it from. And at that point, only the COVID ICUs were PPE. So our clean ICU didn't have to wear PPE. And then shortly after that, not because of that, but just how things developed, any intensive care was full PPE after that, because if patients are intubated, regardless of whether they have or haven't got COVID, that is putting staff at risk and also putting patients at risk if we are not wearing it. So by the time I got back to work from having COVID, or
Oh, I lost you then.
yeah, no, which bit did you not get?
You got back after doing COVID. After doing COVID, you got back
After
after doing COVID, like it was a dance. Let's do the COVID. After having COVID, you got
yeah,
back
and
to work. Like, yes, guys, listening and viewing, she went back to work after having the illness.
oh yeah, I did. So when I had it at the start of March, and so the guidelines then were 7 days, isolate for 7 days if you have symptoms, and anyone in your household isolate for 14 days. So poor Will had to isolate for a week after I'd gone back to work. But I was quite sick on the first day. I say quite sick. For me, I wasn't like, I certainly didn't need to go anywhere near the hospital or anything. I could still um, breathe and whatever, but I was in bed for a day, and then I was sort of just really tired and couldn't really do very much for 3 days after that. But then after that, I felt okay. And so by the time it got to day 7, which was when I would be able to go back, I was on the phone to occupational health, sort of saying, I haven't heard anything from you guys. Can I come back to work? And they said, yeah, if you've got no symptoms, had no temperature for the last 48 hours, and you can go back to work. So I did. I was back to work on my, what was day 8.
That's when you know that you want to do your job, that you love your job. The fact that your job could have killed you, and you're pushing to go back as quick as possible to carry on doing your job. That's when you know you found a job that you that you want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was the worst bit for me about having COVID, was that we had just started on the COVID rota. We just started looking after the COVID patients, getting into it. We had our teams, and I then had to not go into work for a week. And I only missed 3 shifts. How it worked out, I missed 2 night shifts and a day shift. So I didn't feel too bad, but I was definitely keen to get back to work because I hated being off work and not being able to help. And it was just horrible. I was just sat there like, I want to be helping and I can't help. And the guilt was just, even if I tried to talk myself down and say, this is ridiculous, like, you can't help it, you're not actually allowed to go to work. It was really difficult. And as well,
Guilt did play a big part. It was the same with me. So obviously I was just told I can't go to work. That was it. People like you and then my partner were still going out to work. She was still running a normal day. And you come back, and I'd try and be as positive as I could be, but the effects, your partner was probably exactly the same. You try your hardest to help, but they just see you sitting at home. That's all she would see, is that I'm at home. I'm at home. And I was feeling guilty inside, but I wasn't going to let her come back and just be like, oh, I feel so guilty. I wanted to be more like oh, well done. Like, it's great, great. Like, and obviously things were changing where she was, and patients were having the same as you, where they were being told basically go home and die. because it's safer for you to be at home than it is to come in. And all that was
Yeah.
affecting her. And I felt so guilty. I wanted to go out to work. I was trying to get a job to deliver food, and all these NHS jobs they said were out there that weren't that hard to actually, it weren't that easy to actually get hold of. Um,
Yeah.
I felt guilty and wanted to try. So I can imagine what you feel like when you should actually be there on the forefront and doing your job and you can't be.
Yeah.
But I think that's incredible to go through that trauma yourself and to still want to force to go back, to put yourself back in the situation where you could just get it all again. Um, did it ever affect your breathing?
No, so I was all right actually. I was noticeably more short of breath going up the stairs to go to the loo because that's where the toilet is. That's the only thing I noticed. When I woke up in the morning, if I took a deep breath, my chest felt a bit more restricted than it would normally. But other than that, no.
So
And
do you think from a doctor's point of view, or has anyone else said this to you, that because you're quite a fit individual, like you said about your partner, I know you're hella fit. I know that you look after yourself very, very well. Do you believe that that has a big play in, and that you only got a couple of days of a problem, not that you ended up being severely fit, severely ill?
I don't know if it does because well, number one, I for the amount that I exercise, I didn't expect to get any symptoms at all. I think, and that's it shocked me that it did affect me. But I think that must have something to do with viral load, the level of exposure that I got
Yeah,
at
you were
work.
like level 10.
Yeah,
You were in front, like
exposure.
there.
So I do wonder whether that had something to do with it. But I also know of another medic friend, doesn't work at my hospital, but he does about 2 hours a day of cardio. He does a lot of it. He's very, very, very fit. And his oxygen was affected. His saturations were 86 at one point. He looked after himself at home, but he self-proned, lay on his tummy to help that. So his lungs will be tip top, and he was affected.
But do you
So
think
I don't.
because of how fit you are and how well you eat and how well your body just functions, that we don't want to say immune system, because we all talk about this system like we can just reboot it like a computer and we can upgrade it when we want to. But do you feel because of your lifestyle that your body was just able to cope with things to not let you get to the stage where you were on an incubator and like
Uh,
like say get to that level of where you're
yeah,
stuck in a bed and it's affecting you fully? Do you feel that the immune system and how fit you are and plays such a big part in that, or are you shunning that?
no, I don't think that it did. I think probably if I was my age with my health background, in terms of well, nothing wrong with me, and I did less activity and I ate what a normal person eats, I don't think I would have been more sick. I think the people who were severely affected, who we saw in the intensive care, there were people who, so weight played a big part in it. But with weight comes a lot of things. People are overweight for different reasons. Because of people being overweight, they get other healthcare problems. But it's not a simple correlation. There's a lot at play, and sometimes it's health problems that cause people to be overweight, vice versa, so that they're a more poorly population. That's just how it is. But equally, we had people on there who were younger, who were fitter, and they were just as sick, if not more sick. And that was the scary thing about it. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason. There was a general trend towards middle-aged men with high blood pressure and overweight, but that was not a hard and fast rule.
Oh, stuck then.
Is it back now?
There we go.
There we go. Did you miss any of that?
No, got it all. So no correlation. So when the government were they just stabbing at the dark when they were like, oh, it's obese people, it's this, it's that, it's the other? Were they just literally staring at the dark so they could put data out there, or is
No, that is what we saw. The majority of the patients were overweight, did have underlying healthcare issues, and I've got a very limited view of it, I guess, because the patients I saw on the intensive care, you're only admitted to intensive care if we think we can make you better. So there were a lot of patients who would not have come to intensive care because their healthcare condition, their background healthcare conditions would have meant that they weren't suitable to come to intensive care, because unfortunately, once they contracted COVID, we weren't going to be able to make them better. So I didn't see that population of patients. I saw the population where
They got a
they were
chance.
they were very sick, but we saw that they weren't that sick that they wouldn't make it out of
And
intensive care, if that makes sense.
was there more of the a correlation with the ones you were seeing? So were they younger, or could they have been overweight, old, young, fit, not fit? Or was the people you were seeing, because they had a chance, was there a correlation? Were they all the same sort of people?
There was a correlation, so there were more middle-aged men who were overweight, or even younger men that were overweight. We had some ladies that were overweight as well. So there was definitely a correlation with weight.
But they had a
Again,
chance of making it. So
yeah,
what the
yeah.
government
So
was saying about weight was a big factor, was it really? Or were they just
yeah,
going
that's
on statistics that people were overweight and they got it, but didn't mean it was going to fully affect you? Or
yeah. I mean, the thing with being overweight is that when your body is that overweight, and we're not talking just a little pot belly, we're talking like limiting your ability to climb a flight of stairs, for
yeah, yeah,
example, you are
bringing on a lot of house factors.
where you're not built as well to breathe, basically. And if your lungs are having trouble expanding as it is, then lying you down, if you're unconscious, and having that weight on your chest is just not going to help either. So that, I think that's probably the main thing, is just structurally those patients weren't as adept to recover from it.
So did you agree that a big thing came out with like breathing? And obviously I know as humans a lot of us don't breathe properly anyway, and especially if we don't exercise, we definitely don't breathe properly. um do you think that helps, and still in the future is going to help, that people do a lot of these breathing exercises, like a lot of this deep breathing, the diaphragm breathing? Do you think it's going to help us? I know it sounds very hippie, but it's really nice for some of those things to come to the forefront of, instead of just saying eat this food, take that supplement, do this, do that, it's actually like, well, just sit at home and learn to breathe properly, and this could medically help you in the future. Do you believe that's true? Or
I have no idea, to be honest. I don't know if there's any evidence base behind it, but I do know that I like to do some deep breathing every now and then, more for my mindfulness side of things. If I'm meditating, or if I'm doing some stretching, I do some deep breathing with that, and it does make you feel good. And I mean, normally, if you're taking a breath in, I think you'd have to work quite hard to not effectively expand your lungs, especially if you are being active, even just sort of going up the stairs, going for a walk. Chances are you'll be taking deep enough breaths to fully expand your lungs. You're at risk of atelectasis, which is the collapse of the bottom of your lungs, if you are bedbound for a long amount of time, if you've got pain, sort of chest pain, stomach pain, that means that you can't physically take a deep breath in without it hurting you. That's when you're at risk of that, and that's when you need to consciously make sure you're taking the deep breaths. But it's certainly not going to do you any harm, but I don't know whether it's evidence-based that it will do you any good.
you doctors, because there's no evidence, we can't say. It's not on a piece of paper, so we're not allowed to say.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's not going to do you any harm, but I can't see. The thing is, if you ask if something's going to help, then it insinuates that it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
done
no,
well
it's
to
fine.
start with.
Yeah.
But I think that most people are okay at breathing, and do that, and probably do get their entirety of their lungs expanded
It
without
was
having to do anything fancy.
it was just that I knew it came out. It wasn't just like this hippie dude on YouTube said it. It was like doctors and nurses were sharing it, and people were sharing it. So I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like me and you in the fitness world, we spoke about doing some deep breathing, like you say, for mental health, to get lots of oxygen in, etc. Post training. But now that everyday people were talking about it, it was like, this is good that it's not just a new supplement, it's not just a new medical thing that you're going to eat or be injected with. It's like, this is something that everyone could do in everyday life. So I
Yeah,
thought it was, I love that that was going around during the pandemic, because one, everyone needed the mental help, and
yeah.
also if this was going to help, maybe even just ease the pressure on people to think, okay, I'm doing what I can do, not just sitting in the house and hiding away from it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think as well, if you are consciously trying to do some deep breathing, then maybe if your lungs weren't as good as they should be and you're struggling with that, it might be a bit of a wake up call. Say if you're a smoker and you try to do some deep breathing and you struggle with it, then maybe that's what you would need to be like, oh, hold on, I should be able to do this. Maybe I should cut down on my cigarettes. So in that way, it's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, very good thing. So let's go back to you being locked in on this airtight ward in many layers of PPE, your mask sticking to your face, you can't breathe, you can't do your job properly, you're hot, you're overwhelmed with fear, and now you're leaving work and you're seeing people not doing what they've been asked simply to do. Take me through that feeling.
So at the start of lockdown, I was very, very emotionally invested in all of it, really, and it made me really angry. It made me upset. I got, I was quite open with it on my Instagram as well. With it, I tried to. I was working hard at work, going through all of that, and then I was coming home and I was trying to do my public health bit and explain what I'm going through and try and make people see the importance of them doing it. But I wasn't focusing on the good things because there are plenty of people doing what they should be doing, but those things unfortunately weren't shared on social media. They weren't talked about. It was the people who weren't doing what they should be doing that were shared, and I was getting them sent to me all times of the day. Oh, look what this person's doing, this person's not doing this, and what do you think about this? Because I'd been so open about it. And to start with, that was fine, but it just ground me down massively. And I think it was probably about 5 or 6 weeks in that I just had to put a stop to it. I just had to say, look, I can't talk about this anymore, and please can you not send me any of these anymore, because it just got too much. While I was going through that at work and then seeing all of that, I was really, really struggling with it. I had so much anger and frustration and upset that,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
and
bet
I
you
just
went through all those. I bet it went from anger to like, I'm gonna do something about this, to I'm now putting another load on me when I've already got a big load on me, to like, why can't people just please do the simple things, to then upset of, this is humanity and this is what, this is what I'm part of. So you probably went through every single emotion, like you say, getting ground down, and I bet it just ended up, like I say, complete upset. Um, it was horrible to see from my perspective, when I was just like, I say, my partner was nowhere near as in depth as yours, but she's getting upset about things that happened because of COVID. And I'm like, well, you just listen, guys, because it's serious. And then obviously being a friend of yours on Instagram, I'm seeing what you're going through. I couldn't imagine how you felt seeing these people still not doing what they were doing. And that's upsetting in itself, to know that you guys are putting yourself at such high risk, to then know that people just can't do the simple things. And I know it is hard, where someone like you, what you're doing in your profession, tell me if I'm wrong, but not a creature of habit, but once you've started to learn things, it's just natural to you. Whereas these people who are now being told to shove these things on their faces, or stay away from this person, stay away from that person, they're not creatures of habit. They're all these people that have got normal, I wouldn't say normal jobs, but probably not got jobs. um, and they're just not used to having to not follow orders as such, but just to ingrain things in their brains to become natural. What I'm trying to say there. Um,
yeah,
and I did see a recent post of yours as well, like the fairs in town, and you were like, how is this okay? And you can tell that you've now learnt to not deal with it, but you're investing your emotions and your energy somewhere else, which is great to see because that post 6 months ago would have been, why the in hell is the fair in town? You'd have been over there telling them to shut it down, speaking to everyone, telling them to go home, like what you've just been through. Look what's on my face. I've got a mark on my face. Do you think this is funny? Blah, blah. Whereas you can see that you're not going to control everyone. You're not going to be able to help everybody. And like I say, you're just literally just, oh, the fair's in town. This isn't okay. Cool. Leave it at that.
Yeah.
Boom. And I'm glad you've done that because you can't invest your energy in people that don't want to listen, and you can't.
No.
You need to invest your energy elsewhere, on yourself, on your home, on your partner, on your family, on work. So I'm glad that you've. Obviously, you probably still feel guilty. That guilt trip comes in. You probably still feel guilty now that you're not doing something. But as a health and for yourself, I'm glad that you've done that because you're not gonna control everyone, and not if people want to listen, they're gonna listen.
Yes, I agree. And that was kind of the realization that I had. And people had said that to me, had said, look, you can't change everyone's minds. And to start with, that I knew that. I never thought that I could change everyone's minds, but I thought if I was making at least a little bit of a difference, then it would be helpful. But then it just became so much of a burden that I could feel that my compassion, because compassion fatigue is a really big thing within medicine. And we have to be so mindful of it because our job is demanding, and during COVID it was even more demanding. The demand on our compassion was huge at work, at home. You spoke about how you felt guilty while you weren't working, and when Alex came home you were being positive. And I had myself and Alex had the opposite of that, in that we knew that you were at home, and I was so glad to be going out to work because, like, all four of us, we're very active people. We like to have active minds. We like to do things. I was so thankful that I still had my purpose, that I could go to work, and I felt guilty that Will was not able to go to work because I knew if there was roles reversed, I would feel horrible. I would hate it that he was able to go out to work and have a purpose, do his job, and I wasn't. So
Yeah, Alex broke down one day, and it was because she didn't see herself as you as such. So people were sending stuff to the house. We were getting flowers, we were getting bottles of wine, we were getting cards nearly once a week, minimum twice a month. And she broke down one day and said, well, "What have I done? I've done nothing." And I said, "You're having to go out to work.
yeah,
And this thing's dangerous. We have the privilege to stay at home and stay away from it." Like, and she was just like, "Yeah, but I'm just doing my job." And obviously that's exactly how you felt. But it was really weird because I hadn't even thought about that, like how she felt. And she felt like an imposter as such because she wasn't
that's
where
it.
you
Yeah,
were. But she was still they didn't have any PPE. They were dealing with patients that still had to come in, that didn't come in with masks on. They didn't have masks themselves. They had no, just their normal covering. They were also then having to send, like I say, patients home and say, "You're safer at home with cancer than you are to come here." So, like you say, that emotional drain on the emotional effect was just grounding, grounding, grounding. But she still didn't feel like she was worth all the praise and the goodies.
yeah,
I hadn't even thought about that. She'd just get home. It'd be 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd be drunk already because I had nothing else to do all day. And she'd be like, "Babe, yeah, I had a good day." I hadn't even thought about like how she felt still going to work, or if she felt bad because I was at home, or and that's why I think it's been such a weird situation. Like you say, it's nice to say you've been part of this. Now, I always say this to my friends, I never thought I'd be able to tell my kids that I was part of something when the world shut down, the world was closed, and that it doesn't scare me. But you talk to your parents, you've had grandparents and that have said, "Oh, the war this, the war that." I never thought I'd be part of something that where I could say I live by the airport. It was shut. The only thing flying in
Yeah.
and out of there was the military. And it's pretty cool to say I can say it to my kids, but I don't ever want to go through it again, to be honest.
No, no. And I think most people will mirror your views with that. But it's interesting that you mentioned the word imposter, because I don't know if that's because you've heard of imposter syndrome, which is a big thing in medicine. It is in
Yeah,
any
I
sort
was
of.
I was talking to a military guy the other day, and he had imposter syndrome because he'd never been to war.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think
So
when you join these things, like you say, you've joined medicine or medical or the military or the police or something, and you've never actually had these high intense situations, you class yourself as an imposter.
yeah, it's even so. Imposter syndrome is, you can see it in any job really, but in highly functioning jobs, it's worse, because the the nature of people who have got to that position strangely means that they underestimate themselves, and pair that with being in a situation where the demand on you is high, you automatically assume that you're not good enough, that you are not doing the job that you should be doing. And it's interesting that you say that Alex perhaps felt like that because she wasn't working in the intensive care setting, but actually I felt like that because I was. Because if you'd have said to me, this is going to happen, where do you want to be working? I would have said intensive care, hands down, because I had been there for the last 6 months. I knew the units, I knew the staff, I knew how it worked, and I felt comfortable there. I felt like my knowledge would be helpful there, and that I could that would just be the best place for me to be. If this had all happened a year ago, I would have been in A&E. That's what I was on my A&E placement, so that's where they would have kept me, and I would have hated it. I would have absolutely just hated life, because I didn't enjoy my A&E rotation as it was. It's not me. It's to get things done, move on. There's not enough care. There's not enough time with each patient. So if you'd have put me there during COVID, it
Because
would have been
half of them don't need
awful.
to be there.
Well, yeah, yeah. I spent my time in A&E getting told off for making old people cups of tea, but I was like, it's in my treatment plan. So, but I know as well that the hardest thing for a lot of people has been during COVID is having those discussions with patients who don't get to go to intensive care, having those discussions that say, look, I'm sorry, you are so poorly that the best thing we can do now is keep you comfortable and look after you, or like you say, the best thing for you to do is to go home, and it's not a good prognosis. I didn't have to do any of that. So although I was going through the hard times that we were facing in intensive care, and there were hard times, there were young, fit, healthy people who we were looking after for weeks on ventilators dying, and we had to talk to family members over the phone about how sick they were, and it we were it was terrible. It was not nice, but I didn't have to have those conversations, and I didn't have to do that side of it. So I think wherever you were during COVID, it was awful, but you will automatically think that someone else has got it worse.
Yeah.
So for me, doing the things that Alex was doing, and the doctors and nurses who weren't on intensive care, they had a lot of difficult things to do that I didn't have to do.
It's nice. It's nice to hear. Obviously, being um, having Alex as my partner, that's nice for someone who's been in your position. It's nice to hear that. And I think nurses or people all over the world that who um, who are in the same boat, I think that would be nice for them to hear too, from someone in your position who's been at the top, at the forefront, to say that people further down the ladder are respected. I think that's such a nice thing to say. Um,
Well,
has
I think I would say they're not further down the ladder there. It's just across the
I
ladder,
mean,
isn't it?
okay,
Because
I mean on the um,
intensity
yeah,
of the
on the intensity and also
maybe.
I can't even say the infection ladder. The fact that you were
Mm.
10, you were level 10. Someone and you've got it.
Yeah,
down to level 1 where yes, you could have had it, but the chances of somebody walking in, do you know what I mean? Like the chance of someone
yeah.
walking into a to where Alex was probably like 75%. The chance of someone in yours was 100%.
Yeah, I guess you also have to. We were incredibly lucky that we had the PPE. So although it was not very nice wearing those respirators every day, I knew that I had the best protection possible. Whereas on Alex's wards and other wards, all they had were the face masks that you see now. They had
Yeah.
gloves and a pinning. And ultimately, if they were dealing with a COVID patient, they were not protected. Whereas if I was dealing with a COVID patient, I was protected. So
So the infection
in that,
rate is it's still 100% both ways. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
great way to put it. Do you find that it's affecting you now, or have you fully recovered from COVID? Because
um,
I've got a friend who had it, and he's still struggling now, but he had asthma. So I know it scars your lungs and stuff, doesn't it? If it really gets you, it scars your lungs, and he's still struggling now. He actually had to go on an intense fitness program just to try and get over COVID, not to actually just improve his fitness, just to get over it because he couldn't hoover the house, he couldn't climb the stairs, and that was months after.
yeah.
Do you
No, I'm
find
not. I'm not. I'm not affected at all by it. My illness was very transient. I was very lucky, and I didn't notice once I'd gone back to work. That was it. I felt fine.
just straight back to bodybuilding then, straight back to lifting?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My
No,
my training hasn't been affected at all. I'm very lucky in that sense. I think I've had a lot of mental challenges to overcome, and I'm not sure we will ever get over that. I feel a lot better now than I did,
good.
but yeah, I almost feel back to myself in that sense as well. I think I had some. It's difficult because during the time we were dealing with a lot of stuff, and we had no time for reflection and no time
Just
to
go
actually
100
take
mile
it
an
in.
hour.
Yeah, and I think even when I did have some, so our rota was 2 days on, 2 days off, and we did all our shifts were 12-hour shifts. We did days, then 11 till 11, and then nights, like in a rotating pattern. We did that for I think it was about 6 weeks, and then it changed to a similar but marginally different rota. So although I had the time off, I could have had the downtime. It was almost protective not to, because if I spent my 2 days reflecting on my 2 days on and coming to terms with everything that I'd seen, I almost felt like my wall would be down then by the time I went back to work again, and I needed that wall.
Yeah, being
So
vulnerable again.
so I just sort of left the wall up the whole time, which I think that's what everybody did, because um, we had to protect ourselves emotionally from what we were seeing. We had to be able to perform at work, and you just can't do that if you're going to be emotionally affected by everything you see. And so as a consequence then, after that, once I'd moved away from COVID and away from ICU, and I did have time to sit with myself and reflect on it, that's when it hit me hard. And it wasn't until I realized that, reflected on it, and thought, you know what, this is what I've been doing all the way through, and I just not realized. Then I sort of could accept that, and I felt better about it, and thought, you know what, it's okay to be upset and to be not a mess. That's the wrong word. But you know what I mean? Like out of sorts.
Yeah, it's
When you
okay. It's okay
feel that.
to to be real.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Like
if
it'd be weird if it didn't affect you. It'd be
yeah.
weird, and there was no way that we were going to get through all of that and just be like, okay, next.
Are you still on ITU?
No, I have moved now. So doctors change years in August, so I've moved back to medicine now. So
So
I'm
can you
on.
give us any inside scoop? Is ITU getting better? Are we back to normal? Are they overrun still?
I really don't know how it's going to go. It's impossible to predict. My gut feeling is that yes, people are getting infected now, but the virus is just not as strong as it was. And my reasoning behind that is because we're seeing infection rates go up, but we're not seeing them in hospital, which is good. But
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that's going to stay the same, or whether just the area that I'm in, the infection rates are so low that we're not seeing them. Um, it's really difficult to tell because I can't speak for other hospitals. I would like to know. I'm really interested to know whether we are seeing patients represent to intensive care now, with all the talk that's going on about rates increasing again. The
But
one thing that I think
like
is
you say though,
important is,
that we are. Is it? That's the problem with like statistics and data. Like, is the infection rate going up because one, we can spot it more now? Two, people are happy to come out and go get tested, or is the testing more consistent? Um, is that the reason why it's going up? Um, but I do hope, like you say, it's getting weaker, or could that be due to temperature? Because there was a lot of talk of it being, as soon as we hit the winter, then we're going to get the second wave again because it thrives in the winter, or is it that it's getting a bit cooler that it's now starting to die off? Is there any data
yeah,
on that?
it's impossible to tell, isn't it? Because I think during the height of it, they were sort of saying it prefers warmer temperatures, which is why you were safer outside as opposed to indoors. So the winter hypothesis doesn't make much sense, but it does make sense in the fact that people's chests just tend to be a bit rubbish during winter. It's when we see the flu come. So the last thing we want is flu and COVID at the same time, which is why everyone's being wary. Natural history of viruses is that they do self-select themselves to be less severe. So things like the MERS virus, that was just too deadly. It killed itself off because everybody that it infected died, so they were not able to spread the virus. And we need to remember that the sole purpose of a virus is to spread. That's what it wants to do. And so it's going to do whatever it can to mean that it can spread more. And if that means it's less severe, which means that more people have it, but they're not sick, they're not dying with it, but they can pass it on to someone else, like the common cold, for example, then that is the ultimate goal of the virus.
Ah, that's intriguing. I like that. That's a good thought as well. Just take a little bit of that weight off of, well, hopefully the virus will start to get weaker because it wants to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a nice little bit of information to know. Um, so as 2020 rapidly, please, comes to an end as quick as it can, are you looking at? Is there any competitions going to be happening? So for your figure, competing, it is figure you do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So next year, hopefully, I was going to compete this year, but obviously that was just not feasible. It wasn't a good idea. And actually, it's been good for me to force myself to have a prolonged off season, because I've just been one of those people who likes to compete every year. And really, I did need this time away. I don't think I've ever been happier with how my body is in an off season, and it seems really happy with the food and training. So that's good. So I'll probably start dieting again at the end of April next year, and then hope to compete sort of September, August time.
So you got some nice time off then, very long. So you got this time off, the beginning of 2021, to probably try and get back to normal. Work slows down a little bit, even though I know doctors, nurses never slows down. And then back into competing. Have you had any invites to any big comps next year, or is it basically a start process again to get those invites?
Yeah, it will just be regional qualifiers again. I'll be doing the NBF and UKDFBA, I think, next year. I'm just going to stick to the natural federations. And then after that, I will probably have I don't even know if I will compete again after that, because it will be baby time the year after. I
Ooh,
know.
exciting. Yeah, we've had the same chat. I don't like growing up. It's not good.
No, I know.
I don't want to grow up.
I
Um,
know.
but I suppose, yeah, you can, but then you can have that 9 months out, well, 10, 12 months, then go again. Do you think that,
Yeah.
like, obviously I know you're going to be training and the gym has helped you mentally in your life. You found training through having uh, other problems, which is great. So I know you'll be training for the rest of your life. Do you think you and your partner will both keep competing, or just become just a let's keep fit and healthy? Or do you think competing will be until you can compete, till you can keep competing?
I
Which is
think
nice.
Will keep competing. I think will continue to, definitely. For me, previously I would have said no. Once I've got kids, that's probably it. But the biggest and the best thing that's come out of lockdown for me is that I'm well and truly established training at home. So I haven't gone back to the gym, and I probably won't do. Certainly not anytime soon. I don't feel comfortable going to the gym and putting other people at risk while I'm at work. So I've managed to train very effectively at home. And for me, that's something that I didn't think could happen. So I assumed once I'd had a baby, then if only one of us could go to the gym, then it would be Will that goes. So therefore, I would have to just do something else, like run or whatever, when I can. I just accepted that that was what it was going to be, and I was fine with that. But now, if we've got a gym at home, then while baby's napping, I can take the monitor out to the gym with me, and if I'm only in the back garden, that's something that I can actually do. So who knows? It's very exciting. The prospect of that.
I suppose, like, with your job being so intense, it's nice to not just have training, to have a big, real big goal outside of going to work and saving people or delivering medicine, etc. To have a different, like I said early on, that people who do the jobs you do have got this, like, the mental drive to want to learn, to have to keep doing, to have to not suffer, but you do night shifts, so you definitely like to suffer. Um, the fact that do you think that brings you away from your job? So when you're in the gym, when you're prepping, when you've got a goal of getting to a certain physique, does it bring down the level of intenseness from work? Like, do you think that's like a bit of an output, like an off switch to forget about work for a bit?
Absolutely. I've always said that the gym saves me from medicine, and medicine saves me from the gym, because I'm such an all or nothing type person that if I just had one or the other, I would live and breathe it. If I wasn't a doctor, I would be a coach. I would be teaching people to. My life would just be training and fitness. And if I didn't have the gym, I would be reading medicine all the time. I just would be completely
Too into it.
too
Yeah.
much, yeah. So having the two means that I'm forced to find the balance, which means that I can't be 110% into both of them, which I think is healthy, because for me, training is a hobby, and I like the fact that I have to remember that. And if I've had a really tough day at work and I'm absolutely knackered and I can't face training, then that's okay. And I think the same applies for medicine. If I've done so much revision, or if I've had a tough day at work, I know that I've got the gym that I can go and switch off with.
Awesome. So you heard it here. You heard it here first, folks. Infection rates are going up, but death rates are on their way down. Fitness helps you mentally, physically, emotionally. It's a great output. And like I do say to a lot of people that just get out and walk. That can be, you don't have, fitness doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be posted on Instagram and have ripped abs and all the time. Just, if you class it as going out walking, call that fitness. If that's going to help you, it helps people so well with their mental health just to get out and walk. Um,
Absolutely.
so much positive information today.
Yeah, no, I'm really pleased that you asked me. Thank you. And if anyone, I don't know if you want to put on the little thing, if anyone's got any questions that they want to ask me, then they can just drop me a message on
Yeah,
Instagram
perfect.
or whatever.
Where can people find you? And I'll
Just
bank it
my,
below.
yeah, just my Instagram's probably best,
What
I
is it?
think. Um, at
I'll,
Doctor Steph underscore Scrubs versus Shreds. Is
see,
that right?
I
I
was
think
about
so.
to say it, but I was going to say Shred Scrubs, Doctor Steph,
Should
something.
I check
So
it?
yeah,
Let me check it.
yeah, it
I
might
don't
be
normally
good if you
say it.
check it. If you send people to the
I,
wrong place.
I don't normally say it out loud. That's all. Doctor Steph underscore Scrubs versus Shreds.
Perfect.
That's it.
Don't inundate Steph with stupid memes or memes or however you say it, or silly questions about, I don't know, nails, broken nails, or I don't know, ask her deep, meaningful questions,
Yeah.
and also fitness based. She gets herself in hella shape. I think she kind of knows what she's doing. I'm not quite sure, but she gets herself in great shape. Her and her partner, both of them. He's medically trained too, right?
He's a scientist, a biomedical scientist. So he's
Yeah.
got a degree and a master's, and he's doing a PhD. But he's also a coach as well. So he's got nutrition and PT qualifications.
So any
He's
males that want to get
yeah.
jacked, go to Will. Females that want to get figure ready, go to Steph. If not, just a little bit of information. But like I say, don't waste their time. They have a lot of other stuff to be getting on with. But Steph has just offered out her Instagram. Thank you for coming on to the Coffee with Sam podcast, Steph. And I will see you very, very soon.
See you soon.
See you soon.